Hi, I'm here to read a short passage from my still, as of yet, unpublished book, The View from the Dashboard. Give you a little bit of a background as to what is happening in the scene we're about to read. The narrator, Christopher Rains, is a bookstore owner from Long Island, New York. Grew up raised by his aunt and uncle. Mother had passed away at a very early age, so he doesn't remember her. And his father had walked out on him when he was an infant. And the scene that I'm about to read now is from Thanksgiving dinner, where he finally confronts his aunt and uncle about his missing father, who's never been spoken of. And he just basically wants to find out who the guy is, where he came from, what's the story, why has he never been spoken of. So I will begin. Dinner was delicious. The majestic trophy of a turkey that I think Uncle Jimmy felt guilty carving up was cooked so well, we barely needed gravy for flavoring. There was stuffing with bits of bacon and mushrooms courtesy of Aunt Cheryl. I made mashed potatoes with butter and garlic. Megan brought candied yams sweeter than they'd been last year. Caramel topping was the not-so-secret ingredient. Eleanor and Kerry collaborated on string bean casserole, mashed turnips, and even asparagus. For appetizers, Uncle Jim made a guacamole dip, and Aunt Cheryl made beef empanadas and quiches. I had considered making my own buttermilk biscuits, but decided the supermarket brand would be acceptable in the name of convenience. We kept ourselves so busy with cooking and eating that I barely had any time for anxiety about my need to find my lost father. It was a little after 6 o'clock by the time our bellies were full of food, beer, wine, and scotch. The thought of a single bite of pie seemed to all of us a foreign shore miles away, and so we sat back in our chairs, patting our stomachs and jokingly chastising ourselves for our greed. It was about 10 minutes past 6, and there had been no appropriate segue into the subject of my father. So I looked at both my aunt and uncle, and to neither one in particular said, "What do you remember about my father?" They both looked at each other. Uncle Jim then looked to Aunt Eleanor, and Aunt Cheryl looked up at the ceiling. Then all three took turns exchanging glances with each other. Kerry turned to me and shrugged, while Megan looked back at her parents. Megan, of course, would have been old enough to have some vague memory of him at the least. And finally, it was Jim who spoke. "What brought this about?" he asked. I shrugged slowly, although I knew exactly what the reason was. "I can't say for sure. It seems like he's never been talked about, and I wanted to know about him." "Well, what did you want to know?" Jim asked slowly. "To be honest, Uncle Jim, I want to find him. Meet him at least once and talk to him." Cheryl's fork dropped to her plate with a clang, and she held a hand to her cheek as though I'd slapped her. "Christopher," she sighed, No, that's not a good idea. Put it out of your mind, sweetheart, okay?" Jim put a hand on his wife's shoulder, and I could feel her bristling from across the table. "Now hold on, Cheryl. Sooner or later, Christopher was going to ask. He's not a kid anymore. He's almost 30 years old, and he has a right to know." My heart and my gut suddenly plummeted. "Is he dead?" "No," said Jim, "at least, not that we know of. We'd have told you if we'd heard anything, but we haven't." He kept speaking slowly as though he were guarding words that if they escaped would run rampant like a swarm of locusts, devouring all my hopes of finding him. Eleanor reached over and touched my arm, but looked at her younger brother. "Jimmy, don't hide anything from him. He's a big boy now." She turned back to me and winked. "Do you know anything?" I asked her. "Let Jimmy explain, dear, okay?" My uncle crossed and uncrossed his arms. What do you know about him, Chris? That is basically it. I will post more at a future date. In the meantime, please keep thoughts and prayers that I can get the book published. Thank you for watching.